From who they are to how they were found and the mysteries that came with it. Join me as I show you missing people who were mysteriously found alive. In the world today, there are few things more terrifying than knowing that someone you know, care about, or love is missing. Crime dramas often show what it takes to get those people back, but sometimes it's not that easy, not at all. During 1 year in the United States, over 500,000 missing people under 21 were reported, and 158,000 people over 21 were reported missing. That's a lot of people going missing, and yet this happens every year with higher or lower numbers. Sometimes the people are found and it's a very simple ending, yet other times it's not quite that simple a conclusion. 8. The Missing Doctor. This is the story of Carlos Sanchez Ortiz de Salazar. Yes, that is a very long name, and his story has a little bit of link to it as well. Carlos was a Spanish doctor, and he went missing in 1995. After going missing, a lot of people searched for him, and by that I don't just mean in numbers, I mean in terms of how long they searched. The search for him went on for years, until finally, in 2010, he was presumed to be dead, which is sometimes what happens in cases of a certain time period. After all, if you can't find a trace of someone and there are no clues as to where they are or what they are doing, then more than likely, they're either so far off the grid they can't be found, which is what happens with trafficking victims, or they are truly dead and their bodies just haven't been found yet. But ironically, and somewhat hilariously, that's not what happened to Carlos Sanchez Ortiz de Salazar. For you see, in 2015, he was found alive and very well. Where was he? He was on the coast of Toscana and was living as a hermit. And the only reason that he was found was that he was growing mushrooms in his new home, and some mushroom pickers found him. When he was reported to have been found, his family could try to see him, but when they arrived, he was gone. Words cannot begin to describe how odd this case is, but it's clear that Carlos Sanchez Ortiz de Salazar did not want to be with his family, because if he did, why would he have become a hermit? And why would he have ran away when his family knew where he was? It's a curious thing to be sure, but maybe he was a guy who just liked growing mushrooms, if you know what I mean. Number 7. The Man Who Lost Himself. Gabriel Nagy's case is one that will sound very familiar to those who watch TV dramas and such, because his story begins when he called his wife to let her know that he would be home for lunch. This was all the way back in 1985. Naturally, after a few hours and then a day, the family were very worried, and because this was 1985, there was no quick way to try and find him and make sure that he was okay. Sure enough, adding to that worry, his car was found and it was burned to the ground. Yet he himself was not in the car, which added to the mystery of where he was. The loss of the father, in the physical sense, was very devastating. One of his daughters noted to the press in later years that his vanishing affected her in a very deep and very emotional way, which is very fair under the circumstances. She couldn't take all the questions of, "Where's your dad?" and it's hard to blame her for being affected by that. Eventually, with no clues to where he was or sign of him anywhere, the family gave up and believed that he was indeed dead. A harrowing end to the story, right? Not quite. 20 years later, he was found, but not in the way you would expect. You see, the government has the right to call someone dead after a period of time, but before they did that, they did one last check of the medical records they had. And sure enough, a man named Gabriel Nagy was there. What happened to him? Remember his car being burned? That was because he was in a serious car accident, and that left him in a dissociative fugue state, which meant that he couldn't remember who he was or have any memories of his past life. Because of this, once he was discharged, he did odd jobs around his home country of Australia just trying to get by. But he noted to the press that flashes of his past life were coming back to him over the years. When the person who found him told him about his family and showed him pictures of his past life, everything came flooding back to him. This is known as a trigger in the medical industry, and suddenly he knew who he was again. Nagy was returned to his family after 2 decades, and the family was more than happy to accept him back. One of his daughters noted that she hoped this would prove that good things can happen, that miracles can happen. After a story like this, it's hard not to think that's true. Before we continue, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. That way you don't miss any of our weekly videos. 6. Half a century gone. If you think that the last story of a person missing for more than 20 years is crazy, wait until you hear the story of Lucy Ann Johnson, a woman who was missing not for 20 years or 30 or even 40, but 50 long years. Can you imagine being gone for that long from your family and friends in life? That doesn't sound like living, does it? Anyway, her story begins in 1961 when she vanished, and then she wasn't found again until 2013. Yes, she was gone for 52 years. But let's rewind a bit. She had been living a happy life with her husband and 2 kids in British Columbia in Canada. A very standard life, or at least that's what people were meant to believe. As the police investigation went on, the cops believed that it was the husband that made her vanish by taking her life. As crime dramas like to say, it's always the spouse. And yet it wasn't, or at least it wasn't the case that he killed her. However, he was the one that drove her away, because as more came about the case, it was revealed that Lucy's husband was abusing her, and so she ran away in order to get away from him. Fast forward a couple of decades and her husband passed away, but the police didn't stop looking for Lucy, and neither did one of her daughters whom she left behind. For whatever reason, the daughter felt that she was in the Yukon and began a search for her. And that search turned up the best news ever as a woman called her and said that she was also Lucy's daughter, but from another marriage. Lucy was found at age 77 officially and was reunited with her family outside of the husband, obviously because he was gone, and that's likely why she was more than willing to meet with her old family. Upon being found, it was revealed that Lucy had indeed remarried and had many kids and grandkids. Upon talking with the police to officially close the case, she noted that her husband was a very violent man and thus she had to leave him. Some might question her leaving her kids behind, but for abuse victims, sometimes just getting out the door is the hardest step, let alone trying to do it with your children. Lucy made the right call, though, in the large scale, and she lived a much better life because of it. 5. Finding himself. If you're looking for a truly bizarre case of a missing person, yes, Carlos is hard to beat, but still, here is the story of Edgar LaTulip. Why is this one so strange? Timing, placement, and circumstance. Edgar vanished from his home in Ontario, Canada in 1986, and he wasn't found for another 30 years, about 90 minutes from where he went missing. Now, one of the things that separates Edgar from some of the other people on this list is that he honestly wasn't very well mentally. He was born with mental health issues and was recovering from an attempted suicide in a hospital when he just up and vanished. The doctors felt that he wouldn't survive without his medication, but he did, and then some. The only catch was that not long after leaving the hospital, he hit his head and forgot who he was, where he came from, etc. So he went and started a new life as best he could, and he lived for another 30 years before going to a social worker and revealing that his old life had been coming back to him piece by piece. Eventually, he remembered his old name, and the social worker reached out to his mother so that they could be reunited. They were very happy to be back together. 4. Abducted. Without a doubt, one of the worst kinds of missing persons cases is that of not just a person going missing, but going missing because someone has taken them. This is known as an abduction case, and the one we're going to talk about here is the case of JC Dugard. JC went missing in 1991, and what's worse, she went missing right from her home in South Lake Tahoe, California. We know this because her stepfather saw her being abducted and giving chase to the abductors, but being unable to catch them. She was held for 18 years, and the people who took her, Philip and Nancy Garrido, would abuse her and do absolutely terrible things to her, including getting her pregnant with 2 kids. This is where a big twist comes in, because the Garridos at first held her captive in the basement of their home, but eventually she was given freedom because she developed Stockholm Syndrome, as in she sympathized and trusted her captors. Eventually, she was even allowed to leave the house because they knew she wouldn't leave. Eventually, though, Philip Carrito was arrested, his house searched, and JC found. She was eventually returned to her family with her new kids, and she wrote many books and did documentaries about her life. Number 3. Hiro Onada. Not all missing person stories are about being lost in the world unintentionally, for during World War II, a Japanese soldier by the name of Hiro Onada was given an order by his commanding officer before departing on a mission. That order? No surrender. This was given to him during the tail end of World War II, when the United States military was bearing down on Japan, and so to honor his commander's last order, Onada and some fellow soldiers continued to fight the war for 30 years, long after World War II and several other wars had ended. This was done by hiding out in places like the Philippines via their mountain ranges and jungles. They lived off the land and even made new uniforms for themselves via fibers of coconuts. During all of this, people realized who they were and left notes that the war had long been over, but it wasn't enough for Onada. Eventually, he was the last soldier left of his group, and in 1974, he finally surrendered himself. And waiting for him was his former commanding officer to give him the official order to stand down. He would eventually go home, be labeled a hero by the people, and wrote a book called No Surrender about his 30-year war. 2. The Missing Mom. Lula Hood was having a very regular life until one day she had an argument with her family and left the house. This was in 1970, and she wasn't seen for some time after that. So much so that in 1996, her remaining family was contacted and they were told that she was dead. The reason for this was that the cops had found remains that they believed was honestly her. But the irony here, as you can guess, was that they were very wrong. After some DNA tests were found, Hood was found in Florida over 40 years after she left her family in Illinois. When her daughter reconnected with her, she was in for a shock because not only was her mother alive, but she had quite a sizable family of 14 children. Number 1. Scandal on Dewsbury Moor. This very crazy story takes place in 2009, and it is one that has caused a lot of problems for a lot of people. A few years prior, a young girl named Madeline Beth McCann had gone missing on vacation with her family in Portugal. A very tragic story, but not the one we're focusing on here just yet, because a 9-year-old girl named Shannon also disappeared, and that caused a frenzy in the UK. So much so that a man was literally crucified after he was suspected of kidnapping that girl. It was done by a mob of people, not the police, for the record. Anyway, as it would turn out, Shannon was not taken per se, but rather moved to another location by her own mother. Specifically, the police found out that the uncle of the boyfriend of Shannon's mother was hiding her in a bed in his house. Why? Because the mother and boyfriend saw how the public reacted when Madeline went missing and decided if they did it right, they could make bank off of it. As if that wasn't bad enough, both the mother and the boyfriend were abusing Shannon in various ways. So Shannon was taken from them, given a new identity, and put in foster care while the mother and boyfriend were sent to jail. Thanks for watching, everyone. What did you think of these cases of people being missing for various amounts of time and then appearing back in life? Can you believe the stories of how or why they went missing and then how they were found? Which of them is the craziest in your mind? Let me know in the comments below. Leave a like for the algorithm and be sure to subscribe.